Hello, everyone. This is the Colors of Parenthood, and today we have our lovely guest Dina with us. Dina, could you tell a bit more about yourself and a bit about your background and how you chose to work with new moms?
Hi, Georgia. Thank you so much for having me, first of all, on the podcast. So, my name is Dina Pataki. I am originally from Greece. I've been living, though, in Switzerland for the last 15 years, and I'm a mom of two boys. They are now almost 7 and 10 years old. And my partner is Hungarian, so we are both away from our native countries without extended family. So we've been through this lovely experience of raising our family without really having the extended family close by. And in terms of my educational background, well, my background is psychology. Um, I have specialized as an integral coach, so I do life coaching, and my focus is on perinatal mental health. So I have also specialized further on that. And how did that came about? Well, I think it all goes back to my experience as a mom. When my first boy arrived, it didn't go as I expected it to go. I thought that I was going to be so happy and joyful all the time. I had a very romantic idea of what becoming a mom would look like. And so with my partner, we had even said to our parents, we don't want anyone to come. We want to enjoy this, as just us, this nuclear family, the first month. And we said, yes, like we've got it. We're going to enjoy ourselves so much. And then reality hit, and it was like, yeah, we had a completely wrong idea of what this would be like. And then when my second son came, I had a completely different plan set at that time. So we did bring the family then, and we did make sure that we protect our sleep, because sleep deprivation the first time around was a huge issue that caused a lot of the sadness and even the depression, I can say, that I had experienced. And and so yeah, it's through these experiences of seeing, what the expectations are, how you actually experience new parenthood, how difficult it can be, how we don't realize all the changes that are coming with it and how much they're going to affect us. And by experiencing it myself, I wanted to focus on this area and then support new families.
That sounds great. I hear you that a lot of people say also that it's really hard to that when reality hits. And what would you say for you was the most surprising thing when you became a mom?
The most surprising thing, I think, was the sleep deprivation. I had never experienced that degree of sleep deprivation in my life before. As young people, I would party, for example, and maybe not sleep throughout the night, but then you would always have the luxury to be able to stay in bed and replenish your sleep and get back your energy. So with motherhood at the beginning, at least the very first the first few months, there is no opportunity to replenish. It's just constant sleep deprivation, and I didn't expect the effect that it would have on me.
And for you, when did you come back to work? So how long was the maternity leave?
So the first time it was 6 months. Normally in Switzerland it's 4 months. But with my idea of becoming mom, which I said, okay, I'm going to enjoy this so much, and I really want to spend a lot of time with my baby, the most that I can. So I had asked for 2 extra months of maternity leave, and then when I was in the middle of it, I was like, oh my God, I made a huge mistake. I really, really would have liked to go back to work. because I was missing it. I was missing what it felt like my previous life. It felt like all that life had disappeared, and I was suddenly at home doing the same things from morning to night, and it felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I heard that a lot, and I can imagine that because everything changes and nobody actually speaks about that before you become a mom or a dad. Everyone is just, this will be an
Mhm.
exciting journey, but most of the people probably don't think about how they have to leave behind the luxury of not having a child also, like your even your hobbies or luxuries. Looking at my mom, that she changed a lot after having me and my brother.
Mhm.
And now
And, and,
from the
and and
yeah,
I just
sorry.
wanted to add that the irony is that with the second one, I said, okay, I'm not going to take extra months this time because last time, it didn't work out. And then because the experience with the second one was so different, I was like, oh, I should have taken, those extra months. uh, so it was, yeah, that's the thing that you always go with certain expectations, usually, of what it will look like, how it will feel like. And very frequently, those expectations may not be the reality.
And when you had your second one, would you say that now you feel like really prepared to have a third one, like hypothetically, like now I know what to do?
Well, definitely, I would be more prepared mentally. Maybe not physically because I'm getting old. So I don't know if I could handle more sleep deprivation at this stage of my life. But I would definitely be more prepared mentally and emotionally.
Okay, and now going from perspective of you being a coach, what would you say are the most common struggles that moms and dads are experiencing when they're transitioning into becoming a new parent?
Mm. So I think the very first one is what we already touched upon, this gap between the expectations and reality. And that can show up in so many different ways. Like it can be that the mother imagined a birth in a certain way and things didn't happen the way she thought they would happen, or she would expect to bond immediately and perfectly from the very beginning with her baby, and maybe that doesn't really happen the way she was expecting it. Or breastfeeding, maybe she would have difficulties that she wasn't expecting to experience. Again, when I said the sleep, the sleep deprivation, for example, a lot of moms expect to sleep when the baby sleeps, or that they're going to be taking strolls with the pram, and the baby will be sleeping quietly. And sometimes uh, it can be more challenging to soothe and help your baby sleep. So there are a lot of gaps that can happen between the expectations and reality, both in the practical sense of what will actually happen, but also in the emotional sense of how you think that you are going to feel. And the thing is, when things don't go according to your expectations, usually there is this thought of, okay, this is not how it's supposed to be, so what am I doing wrong? So I see a lot of new parents feeling that they are at fault, that they didn't foresee something, that they're not doing something well, and it's their fault for why this is happening.
Yeah, I think probably it's also because a lot of new parents are reading a lot of books of how to become the perfect parent. And usually no one is telling you it's okay to not do everything as it's in the book, for instance, and nothing is for sure, like nothing is 100% you have to do that. And I think with the breastfeeding it's also the same, because I've heard from other women that they went to coaches for breastfeeding and it's just not happening. And the coach is like, well, it's not for everyone, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're a bad mom and your body's failing you, but that's the first intrusive thought that usually people have.
Yes, absolutely. It's this constant self-criticism that can happen when you try to attain that perfection, as you say, when you try to reach those really, really high standards and do everything by the book. And there is so much pressure as well in from society as well to do certain things in a certain way. Um, and the thing is that every parent wants to give the best to their kid. There is a huge sense of responsibility. And when they feel, when that perfection kicks in, which views like anything less than perfect is a failure, that's a huge failure in the sense like I'm failing at this role, which is one of the most important roles I'm taking in my life.
And also with all the you want to have this kid for a long time now, and when it happens and you've been preparing for months and maybe just year or so because you wanted it so bad, and when it doesn't happen, I guess this is when it hits really hard.
Mm,
From my perspective as a psychologist, I hear a lot with postpartum depression and anxiety is mainly that they were thinking that everything will be okay, but people don't usually also focus on mental health, which is quite an important thing when you become a new parent because everything changes your whole life. You have your new identity basically, and people are grieving, and they are feeling really a lot of guilt because they're grieving because they think I should be really the happiest now.
mm. There are a lot of contradictory emotions that parents experience, especially in the early times. As you say, there is that happiness, but there is also the guilt. Uh, there is this sense of, there is also this sense of wanting to control a lot of stuff. Um, that I also see, going back to your question of, common struggles, um, because control often goes hand in hand with this perfection. Trying to have control over the routines, for example, or control over how things are done. Okay, that they are supposed to be done in a certain way, or when things need to be done, like immediately, because we can't have the baby cry for more than 1 minute. But it's also a lot around controlling their own emotions. Like I'm only supposed to feel the happy emotions. I'm only supposed to feel the pleasure. I'm only supposed to feel everything that should be positive around this time. And I shouldn't be feeling everything else, the guilt or the sorrow or the sadness or the grief, whatever there is. And when they're trying to control their emotions, they just don't allow them to feel what they feel, basically.
Yeah,
And then
and
can be detrimental to the emotional wellness of the person.
it's just such a vicious cycle because
Mm,
you think that you should be happy, but you're not happy, and then you're feeling guilty because you're not happy, and you still are not accepting those negative emotions, which are part of being a human, not only a
mm,
parent. It's just everything. But I love this saying that I hear quite often: it's everything all at once when you become a parent. And it sounds really overwhelming, but also we can look at it from the perspective that we are human and we are experiencing every emotion, and I think that's part of beauty of life. But I can understand why this vicious cycle is going. And I'm really curious to hear if what are you giving as advice when women are saying about this guilt? Because I think this is one of the most like the main struggles, like feeling guilty inside of you all the time.
Well, it depends on the particular experience because that guilt can arise for different reasons. But mainly, usually, it arises from this feeling of I have done something wrong because that's the definition of feeling guilty, right? I plead guilty at court. I have done something wrong and I need to make up for it, and I'm really, really sorry about it. So the question is like what it is that you think that you are doing wrong. Um, and a lot of times while we explore that question, it can be very helpful to unpack certain things and become aware in a deeper way of what is driving it, and then you can find ways to deal with it.
Yeah, and also like feeling guilty means that you know that you're responsible for something and you've done something wrong. And as you said, I think it's a great question to ask yourself, what exactly have I done wrong, and what was the time that I should have done something different? And
Mm,
I guess people also feel a lot of shame, and I think it's interconnected, like guilt and shame, because you're embarrassed that you did something wrong in front of the world. It's such a complex thing, the those emotions of
mm.
shame and guilt, and also being you're feeling that you're being accused. And I think this is also quite interconnected with feeling guilty, right?
Absolutely. And the other question as well to ask when feeling guilty is, okay, where is the evidence that I have done something wrong? Because a lot of it is self-judgment. A lot of it comes from our own selves, that inner critic, that inner voice in the mom, for example, or in the father saying, you should have done that. You did that wrong. You didn't do it well enough. You should have done the other thing. And that constant criticism, that's also what's driving the guilt. But there is no evidence usually of that failure because it's all coming from that voice that is asking you to attain those impossible standards.
Yeah.
And then shame is of course the shame for me is even worse in the sense that you internalize what you have done wrong. And instead of saying, okay, I've done something wrong, it's like, I am bad. I am a bad mom. I am a bad parent. So it goes even deeper and it hurts the self confidence of the parent even more and how they feel about themselves.
And I wanted to ask you, when you became a parent, did you felt judgment from others, or or you now, when you think about it, you have just projected it on yourself?
That's a really good question. I mainly projected it on myself because I had that fixed idea of how the ideal mother should look like. And so what I should be doing, how I should be feeling, all these shoulds and musts that come. And because I wasn't living up to those expectations, I thought that I was failing. And there were moments when I had said to my partner, like, did we make the right choice? Am I cut out to be a mother? Did we make a huge mistake? Because it really felt like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. Yeah.
um and going back to the social support, as you shared with us that when you had your first child, you wanted to experience it only with your partner, and you really missed actually the help of your family. Is that right?
Yes. Mm.
Would you say is that also you see in your clients and women that you help, that a lot of pressure and everything is actually worse when they don't have the support of the family, not only doing it with the partner?
It's definitely more difficult when it's just two people. Of course, it's better than being one. I imagine single parents have it even more difficult. It's even more difficult for them. But again, for two people, when you also need to handle work, because one of them, I imagine, needs to return to work and work full time at some point. Um, it's really not easy to figure out how to do it all. The dynamics change so much. So it's not only about figuring out how to support each other in that sense when both parents are going through that transition into how they feel, their sense of self, their perception, their expectations, all of these things, both experience them at the same time. But it's also about adapting to the dynamics that are changing in the couple and who does what, who takes what responsibility, how they can support each other, not just practically, but emotionally in that space when both might still try to figure out how they feel, personally. But then they also need to find that space where they can support each other. They are also both in this learning phase. Babies don't come with manuals, so they are both trying to figure out how to do things. And sometimes it helps when you have other people outside that bubble, let's say, of these dynamics that can perhaps perceive things differently, or who perhaps um, have experienced, perhaps they were parents themselves, and they can support the couple in that sense, again practically but also emotionally, being there to listen, to empathize, to validate, all of these things that new parents would really really need, um, going through the transition.
Yeah, and would you say that for parents is actually easy to ask for help? And what is the difference between a mom and a dad when asking for help?
Oh, this is a huge question. Asking for help. Well, it depends. There are people who are good at asking for support, but there are people who may have never done it before. It all goes back to their way of being, the way they are used to do things, and what they have practiced in their life before, and what they feel capable of doing. So, for parents who have never practiced asking for support, and I see this a lot in very passionate, career-driven parents who have accomplished a lot, who have studied a lot, and really focused and build this self-confidence in themselves. That they feel very competent at what they do. They have the knowledge, and when parenthood comes, suddenly they feel that they don't know anything when it comes to that matter, and that really can create an imbalance about how they feel about themselves. So for those parents, asking for help is more difficult because they're not used to it. They never had to do it before. So they need to learn how to do it. And and that's a very conscious endeavor. They need to be willing to learn how to do it and try it out. And also find the words, because sometimes people miss the language on how to do it as well, so that they can receive the support they need. They can satisfy their needs.
Yeah, and probably it comes from this sense of that I want to be perfect, I want to do everything, and if they ask for help, they deduce that it means that they're helpless, and this probably is a really uncomfortable emotion and feeling. So it's really the parents are struggling with it. But also I imagine that moms are more prone to do that because they're the ones that bear the child, they were the ones that gave birth, so they feel like they're responsible only and they need to do it like internally. And that's my imagination though, so I ask you, have you seen that? And also that fathers are more prone to be supportive and say I'm here for you and I'm here to help, but moms are not the one that actually seek help that much.
There are so many layers to this, and so many things that can happen. Like, for example, especially for people, because you touched again in the point of perfectionism and wanting to do it all, which is spot on. And sometimes people may ask for help, but they would want things to be done their way, the perfect way. And if it's not done that way, then they're not happy. So they prefer never to ask for the support because it will never be done according to their standards. So there's you have that layer too. And then there is the layer of the expectation of the husband, like the father, being the rock. There's this cultural expectation that, I'm the strong person here. I'm the one that holds things together. I'm not supposed to show, emotions. I'm the rock, I'm here. And fathers go through emotional turmoil as well. They can also feel angry. They can feel overwhelmed. They can feel sad. They also experience so many changes. And so, because there is, however, that societal expectation, a lot of times they might not ask for that help because they say, okay, I'm not supposed to do that. I'm supposed to be the rock. Um, there are so many dynamics that happen in this field. Like, we can talk for a long time about this subject.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about like some people just like to do everything by themselves because they think it will be the best. I guess it's the same with roles in the household as well. Like sometimes I've
Mm.
heard my mom like I will just clean it better. So even if someone wants to help, she might go over it and clean it herself afterwards. So it's like we might as well not even do it because at the end of the day, she's gonna be the one that wants to do it, and she thinks that she'll do it the best. And as a following from what we just said, I've heard also that women are feeling guilt that their partner is doing all the work outside of the household. So they go there, work all day long, and they're at home, and they're feeling that my work as a mom is that I need to do this and this and that at home. So I'm not really willing to ask for support right now because I feel like I should do it, and he's doing all his role and part of his role. Yeah.
Yes, that's another thing that can happen. It is very common for couples to fall back into default gendered roles, let's say,
Mm.
because that's what they have observed growing up, perhaps. So there are moms that say, I should be able to handle it. It's that's my responsibility, as you just said as well. And so asking for support when the father comes back from work sometimes can be difficult for them. For other mothers, however, it comes really natural, and they say, "Okay, yes, he was at work, but I'm also working at home, and it's really, really hard work. So when the partner comes back, we should share the responsibilities and share everything else." So yeah, it really depends as well on the couple, their dynamics prior, how they grew up, the particular cultural expectations, their own personalities. So we can see a lot of different kinds of dynamics there.
Okay, and changing a bit the
Mhm.
question, what are some tips that you would give for self-care after you become a new parent? Like, as you already touched the sleeping point, but what other things are really important?
Well, the postpartum period is particularly challenging, when it comes to practicing self care. Babies need constant care around the clock. So the notion of time for parents, how they get to spend that time changes significantly. And most parents are just on survival mode at the beginning, at least. And so when you are on survival mode, it's really, really difficult to have energy or time for self care. So I think the very first thing is to really acknowledge how difficult it is and why it feels so hard. Um, but having said that, I think there is also this myth again that we talked about, the good mothers. I don't know if we talked about it or not, but good mothers should sacrifice themselves, for their kids. And for me, this myth is detrimental because it passes this message that it's okay to neglect my self-care
Mhm.
because I'm doing it for the sake of the kids. And so, no matter how challenging it is, and despite that myth, which we definitely need to overcome, it is very important to practice self-care. Some of the tips that I would give is is how can you redefine self-care for yourself? In that space and that time, in those new things that are changing, how can you bring self-care into your daily life, perhaps in a more creative and different way? Like one of the things that I very frequently ask moms, invite moms to consider is when you wake up, ask yourself the question like, how can I nourish myself today? And don't think about it with your head. Place your hand on your heart and say, okay, how do I feel I need to nourish myself today? And it can be many different things and very simple things every day, like I missed this friend of mine, I want to call her. Or I haven't been out in 4 days, so I'm going to take a short walk around the block. Or I'm going to cook that comfort food for me even if no one else in the family eats it. I'm going to make it just for me. So it can be anything really. The important thing is not what the mother chooses to do or how long she's going to do it for. What's important is the intention to practice that, the intention to take that moment, even if it's 2 minutes for herself. And that's for me is a good way to practice, for example, self-care in that space of early motherhood when they are when time is limited.
Mhm. And
Um, but there are also other tips as well, that I tend to share. But I realize that we have limited time, so I don't know if you want to go further into that or not.
well, I really like that you touched the detrimental meat of that mother should sacrifice everything to her children. So I wanted to ask if you see it in your clients as part of also feeling guilt if they actually take some time for themselves, and if they decide,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to have a walk but without my child now, like even for 15 minutes. Would you say like this is also making them feel guilty?
Yes, yes, that's very, very common, very frequent. This feeling that if I choose to spend time for me, I'm depriving it, I'm taking it away from my baby. And that creates a lot of guilt, unfortunately, yes.
And it sounds like a really, really hard thing to change around, because I can imagine a lot of people are feeling like that, and they have to really reconstruct how they think, because it's a long
Mm,
process to do it if they feel it intrinsic that they have to do it, and if they don't do it they're responsible, so they're feeling guilty, that they're taking a bath, a longer bath for instance, or something like that. I don't know, it sounds
mhm.
like a really tricky thing to change.
It is, and any kind of change takes time, of course, right? So and it happens gradually. So it's not something that um, mothers can change the way they see it from one day to the next. It takes a lot of work, as you say, and gradual work. Um, but again, it goes down to those questions that we said around guilt, like what am I doing wrong? Why is it wrong to take 10 minutes? Shower
Yeah.
instead of 5? Why is it wrong uh, to wanna uh, to wanna sleep 30 minutes longer? Or why is it wrong that I wanna meet with a friend? So going back to analyzing, what is driving the guilt and where is the evidence that I am actually doing something wrong can be very helpful.
And another question in that topic, would you say also is part of like being obsessed with, as we already touched upon, being perfect and controlling everything? Is it like that you feel also reward if you sacrifice everything? Have you seen it like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That reward comes very much with what society makes us think, because we admire parents who sacrifice it all for the kids. We talk about them with uh, great, I can't find of another word. I will use again admiration. And so when we talk about it in that way, of course, parents feel that, oh, you know what, I'm doing something that is elevating me, I'm doing something, beyond um, something that is so powerful, and, it transcends a little bit things beyond what they really are, because the person, you're really harming basically yourself by not allowing yourself to slow down, by not allowing yourself to take those pauses, and practicing basic self-care.
It really makes me think what you said, because I actually haven't thought about it, but we admire people who do um, a lot of hard work. Basically, people who burn out, probably not only when it comes to parents, but we admire people who are amazing, almost that because we compare ourselves with them, and we want to be there, but for us,
Mm,
they're just like the ideal. And we don't know what's behind the curtains, and we don't actually know the pressure and also the sacrifices that people do to be those great and amazing parents, for instance. And I think that's such a great point, because it makes us think that it's also in our hands to change that, and to understand that becoming a parent is not about being the greatest parent ever and doing everything for your kid, but to find that balance and to enjoy parenthood as well. It just
mhm.
made me think a lot.
Yeah, it's a journey, parenthood, isn't it? It's a journey of constant learning.
Definitely. I think even now, my mom, when I'm 24, she's learning from me. And of course, I'm learning from her every day, but I can see that even when children are growing up, parents are still learning from them. And I guess that's the most beautiful thing, I would say, because we grow up and we learn and we develop with each other. So it's quite amazing. And
Mhm.
as we're coming to the end, I really wanted to ask you, what type of advice would you give to women that are just starting to realize they want to become a mom? So they're not even before they give birth. What advice would you give to them? What would you say to them?
Well, I think what I would say is start from what we just said, like acknowledge the fact that parenthood is a journey of continuous learning. And so, by definition, perfection cannot exist in parenthood, because it is a journey of constant learning and adaptation. As the kids grow older, like you said, they require different things from us, they have different needs. So, we need to constantly adapt and learn to be able to meet them where they are. Um, I would also advise them to allow themselves to receive all the support they can get, and set a plan for the postpartum period on how they can maximize the support they can receive. They certainly don't need to do it all, okay? They don't need to do it all with ease, effortlessly, because there is also this assumption, and they don't need to enjoy every single minute of it, because parenthood can be tough. There are things around it that we don't particularly enjoy, and that's fine. Um, but I think that the most important message, if I were to leave people with one thing, is just be kind to yourself. Like, imagine how you would speak to a friend, a person that you really, really deeply care about, and talk that way to yourself.
That was really beautifully said. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. I had a great time. And I hope our listeners also would enjoy it because I think it was really informative. And for me, it was also informative. So thank you, Dina.
Thank you, George, again for having me on the podcast, and I wish you every success.
Thank you.